Do not judge others, and God will not judge you. Is that even possible? And what on earth does Jesus mean when he's saying this? And when we think about that statement in the context of the rest of the Bible, well, we see an awful lot of judgment actually going on. God is constantly judging people and communities. We read about the final judgment at the end of time. There's even a book in the Old Testament called the Book of Judges. So what does it mean when Jesus says, "Do not judge others, and God will not judge you"? Because clearly, making judgments is actually just a part of human living, and there are plenty of examples of judging in Scripture. Surely it's good to judge. Well, let's just think about the context for a moment. Just before Jesus makes this statement, he says something else. He says, "Be merciful just as your Father is merciful." So the first principle of judging is mercy. Any activity of judging that we make must be underpinned by mercy. And mercy is to not give people the punishment that they deserve. And it's a beautiful matter of fact, isn't it, that when God does make judgments about our behaviour and the decisions that we make, in his judgment, he decides to show mercy to us and not give us what we deserve. When we think about our lives, the mistakes that we've made, the mistakes that we continue to make, God is correct in his judgment that we stand guilty before him, and yet he responds with mercy and he forgives us. But here's the thing with God, there can be no mercy without judgment. And the truth is that we too inevitably judge the behaviour of others towards us when we are hurt by what they say or when we are hurt by how they have behaved towards us. It's human and it's divine to judge, because that is part of the process of understanding what has happened. The question is, what are we going to do with that judgment? Are we going to condemn? Or are we going to be merciful? To show mercy towards others has to start with a deep awareness that God has been merciful to us. If I've got a deep experience of God's mercy, if I know deeply what it is to be forgiven, even when I've made bad choices in life, then I will be more willing to show that same mercy to others. Who am I to condemn others when God has not condemned me? And that's what Jesus says here in verse 37. He says, "Do not judge others, and God will not judge you. Do not condemn others, and God will not condemn you. Forgive others, and God will forgive you." So not condemning others, not sitting in judgment over others, having the ability to forgive those who have hurt us, has to begin from our own experience of God's grace and mercy towards us. So perhaps when Jesus says, "Do not judge others and God will not judge you," what he's really saying is this: it's not that we're not to judge at all, because that would be impossible, but that we are not to judge incorrectly. We are to judge mercifully. We are to judge and forgive. Without judgment, there can be no mercy. So how do we judge correctly? Well, I think there's two principles to abide by. Firstly, don't be hypocritical. It's always dangerous to judge someone's behaviour for a whole host of reasons, and not least because we don't know what their life story is. There are always circumstances that lead to people making the decisions they do, for good and for bad. And we don't know their circumstances that have led up to their behaviours, so we have no right to stand in pious judgment over anyone. Who knows how we would respond if their life story was ours? As the saying goes there, "But for the grace of God go I." We are all just frail and weak human beings muddling through life as best we can. So don't be hypocritical. Don't judge people without knowing what is going on in their life and thinking that you are better than they are. Secondly, remember that only God knows the hearts of others. It's an increasingly unpopular thing to do these days, especially on social media platforms, but I think it's really important to give other people the benefit of the doubt. We don't know what's going on in people's hearts. We don't know their motivations. We don't know their fears and their anxieties. And it's always better to begin by giving people the benefit of the doubt rather than rushing into critical judgment. So I don't think Jesus is condemning judgment in this passage. Instead, I think Jesus is encouraging us to judge correctly. Jesus judged others. Moses, the Old Testament judges, and all the prophets judged people. God the Father will hold the final judgment. We all make judgments as part of everyday living. Judging is an essential part of our lives. It's how we stay safe. It's how we make good and rational choices. It's how we form positive relationships. Judging in and of itself is not wrong. The question is, what do we do with the judgments we've made? If our response is not based in mercy, then we fail to mirror the love of God. If we're hypocritical, thinking that we are better than others, then we fail to mirror the love of God. If we don't give people the benefit of the doubt, then we fail to mirror the love of God. Judging is part of life, but let's do so without condemnation. Let's do so without a sense of superiority. Let's do so with hearts full of forgiveness and mercy. And by so doing, we will then reflect the loving heart of God in our relationships with others.